if you want to support the show, any of the shows, either this or whichever show, I'm not on right now because this is just a blanket ad for all of them, and the website, you can go to bewareofspoilers.com. In the description for any of the episodes of Beware of Spoilers, there is the option to donate. If you don't want to donate that way, you can donate directly through the website. We do have that, mwpnews.com. And if you don't want to support that way, then going to mwpnews.com will help out because we have ads there. We don't want to keep it, where there's a lot of ads. There's a few ads. But the point is we want to make it so that way, we can sustain this for the long term. If people donate, we're never going to paywall anything, I don't think, as of right now. But if people, start donating, we'll start doing cooler and cooler stuff. Like donations are how we get to cover stuff like Tribeca and other, film festivals. And, we may be able to bring on more people to help out. So if you want to help out the show and you want more content from us, by all means, even just going and giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify helps out a lot. But that's it. That's the only ad we'll have on the podcast ever. But here's whatever podcast you're going to be listening to. Good morning and welcome to the Backlog Files. I am Adam. So let's just get the requirements out of the way. This review, we got a code for this from I forgot the name of the dev. I should have written the name of the dev down, but I know I know it was. I think it's Pop Agenda is the name of the PR firm that sent it. They gave us a code in advance to play the game. I played the Steam version of the game that is now available for everyone. And this is provided at no cost for review purposes, so thank you to them for doing that. Now, what we're here to talk about today is Arranger, a role puzzling adventure. And I played through this game, and I think that let's go through a little bit of my background with this game first, because I went to I went to Tribeca last month, the Tribeca Game Showcase, and I played a bunch of games, this being one of them. And this one caught me off guard a little bit because I didn't go into it with any expectations for it. I really wanted to try out Neva and Skate Story more than anything else. But it was, it was this that, that really captured my imagination. And because it's a Rubik's Cube, kind of game. It's a puzzle game where it's a fantasy role-playing game where you are this little hero and you got to move around and you do it on a grid as if it's a Rubik's Cube. So you got to slide things up to come up to the bottom. If you hit objects that are static in place, you can't move them past that. And it really captured my imagination. So I played through the game. I played through the demo when I was there, and I really enjoyed it. If you go back and listen to our Tribeca coverage, you will hear me, blow this game at length. And I was like, I went into this with no expectations, and it did a lot of really good. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. So here we are now at the, the end of the, now that I've played the game in full, now the game is out, I am not mixed on it. I would say I'm overall positive on the game, but I still have some slight, not misgivings, but like some things about the game that I'm not overly hyped about. In terms of rating for Arranger, I would say this is like, are they putting in a traffic light here? Fuck me. I would say this is a solid, let's say a 4 out of 5 on our scale. I think the game is way too short. You can blow through the game, and in the email it says 4 to 5 hours, which makes sense considering they gave me the code the day before yesterday, which the review embargo lifted yesterday at noon. I just didn't have time to get through the entire thing because I'm a busy person, and it's Comic-Con, and it's, there's a lot going on this week. So I played through as much as I could over the last 2 days, and now I've beaten the game, and I encountered very few bugs, but the game is very short. You leave the town, you go out into this world, and you fight the bad guys who are making things static. And you have to figure out why they're making things static and all of that. As you get into the third act, there are some things that I think work about kind of what the moral of the story is. Which is this idea that, it's static. The static is being generated by people. They're just exploiting the static and using it for their own gain. And the static comes from conflict between people. And, we're not doing anything. We're just using what's already there. And it's, at the end of the day, it's a bunch of rich people who don't have any powers of their own who are using it. And it's an interesting kind of, it's an interesting critique. I think it gets a little too ham-fisted at times, and it to the point where it can come off like talking down to you, and I get it, but at the same time, I'm like, all right, let's just tone this back a little bit, because while I agree with most of what you're saying here, I think that you gotta tear it back a little bit and be a little bit less, like I said, ham-fisted in your approach to messaging. And I think that's kind of the issue. It is interesting though, the puzzles, you can fuck yourself with the puzzles a little bit, for lack of a better word, where you can move things into places where it's harder to do. You can lose things, and you have to go back and find them. And there is no reset button, which I also found to be an interesting design choice, which is one of those things where, I don't think the game is that hard, which I think is also part of the reason why I think the puzzle is, why the game is a little short, is that once you get into a groove and you start, it's going to take you a little bit during every gameplay session, which probably you'll bang this out in one, but in every gameplay session, it's going to take you a little bit to reacclimate yourself to the controls, because it is so unique. But once you get into the groove, you're good. You're going to be playing it no problem. You're going to be, just moving along and getting through the puzzles, especially once, you do that. And each world has kind of the same setup. You get to the world, each world has its own little mini mechanic, and world, section of the game is, each one has its own little mini mechanic where it's like this one you can pick stuff up and move it. This one you can, you have to move two people in tandem. This one you have to, line shit up, and it's each world has its own little thing like that. But at the end of the day, when, as you, here are rafts. Raft was the big one, the big one for one entire section is it's all on the water, so everything has rafts. And I think that a lot of the things, the mechanics all work, and the game is not buggy or anything like that. But I do think this is I think the length of the game is a little bit of an issue, because again, 4 to 5 hours is something that you can sit through, and there isn't a ton of replayability to it where you're like, oh, let me go through and do another run quick or something like that. It's no, this is just a, sit down, get through it, move on, and get on to your next experience kind of day, which is kind of why, at $20, I would say it's a little bit steep for what it is. But, I think the art style is unique, and I think that, I think the game is fun enough, and the puzzles are fun enough where you're like, oh, this is cool. But at the same time, I don't think it goes deep enough to where you're like, oh, I think that I think the game is, fundamentally, genius or anything, where you're like, this is something that's gonna, I don't think we're like this kind of occupies the same place as like last year we had Venba for me, like where it's like it's fun, it's the puzzle aspect's kind of cool, the story is kind of engaging, but it's a short experience, and I think that by and large it's kind of a fun game. But would I play it again? Probably not. Like I've played through it once, and I think that that's all I've really needed to play through for this. Like, I don't think I need to go further than that with this game. Or I don't think that like 6 months from now, or a year from now, or even in a few months when I go through and I think back for Game of the Year, I don't think it's going to be toward the top of my list anywhere. But I think the gameplay, I think the score is pretty good too. I didn't see who did the score, but the score is pretty solid too. But I would recommend this game. Like, I would say this is a good, if you can get it on like a Steam sale, or if it ends up like on Game Pass or something, I could see this being a good game. And I think this is also a good, like, I talk about like second screen games, which are games that you can play on your, like, I think the Switch is a good second screen console, where like you're watching TV, and then you also have your Switch going separately. I think this is a great second screen game, where it's like, this is a good Switch game. This is a good, what's the other big one? Like, a Steam Deck game. And that was the other thing too, is that I went to turn it on, and it told me I needed to use a controller, which I thought was interesting. I'm like, oh good, I like that they do this, because I do very much prefer playing with a controller over mouse and keyboard, but I was like, I don't think I really need a controller for this, because I remember playing it the first time and I was like, isn't it just moving, and like, there aren't that many keys you gotta hit, so it's not like you're doing a ton. And that's kind of, and it's like, look, that could have been a mouse and keyboard game, but whatever, it is what it is. Yeah, I mean, like I said, this is a 4-star game. I don't think it's a good get this full price. I think, if you can get it on discount, that's probably better. I think that I think the game is fun enough, but I think people are going to bump into the runtime. And in fact, the puzzles do get progressively easier as you go, and not because they're designed to be easier, but because they are, they're, what's I'm looking for here, like, progressive, like, as you get better at the game, the puzzles don't increase in difficulty as you progress. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that, like, each world has its own mechanic. And because each world has its own mechanic, you can't really get that escalation of it, because they have to kind of bring you back, not entirely to square one, but like part of the way to square one for each one, where it's like, okay, so now we have to block these lasers, or not block the lasers as we go, depending on what each part of the level requires. So, like, you have to kind of be retaught that, and then you kind of hit a skill plateau on it pretty quickly. Or like the final world, you have to walk around with these other guys behind you. Like, and you have to they're gonna follow you around, so you have to hit these bells to get them to sit, and then you have to have them with you a certain amount to get through the thing. Like, it's an interesting approach, but what it ends up doing is, it's like they never get too deep into how much harder could this get. And that is kind of the biggest issue that I have with this game. But yeah, I think that, and the thing is too, is like, if you just want to experience a story, which I don't see that being the case for many people, like, I think the story is fine, and I think that when you're playing a puzzle game like this, I don't think the story is the most important aspect, where it's like, it has to be something fantastic, or it has to be something, memorable and great. I think it just has to be kind of whatever it is to get you from puzzle to puzzle, and I think that it is for that. But if you do want to, or you find one of the puzzles too hard, which I don't think is going to be the case, a lot of the puzzles are reasonably easy. If you just sit there and, like, there are ones that I had to sit there and stare at for a bit, but I figured it out and moved on. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, you're gonna have to sit there and stare at it for a bit and do it. But if you don't want to do that, there's an assist mode that you can turn on that will allow you to skip the puzzles entirely. Where you can just, like, I turned it on to see what it would look like, and it's an accessibility option where you can put a little, it puts little things. It's like you can either skip the puzzle or you can move to the other side of the puzzle and do it that way. It's an interesting choice to have that, especially for a game as short as this. And I think it speaks to them thinking the story was going to be more irreverent than it comes across, because it's like, I'm not someone who's against preachy, but the story does come off preachy in a way that, like, it doesn't come off as subtle. There's not nuance to it, because nuance implies like a both sidesism, but like there's no like subtlety to anything where you're just kind of like, here's what it is. But look, I think that's a good place to wrap up for today. Arranger's available now on, I think it's Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, and Switch. You can play on whatever console you choose. I believe it's $20. And there's one other big thing with this. I forgot what it was though. Yeah, it's available to watch. But we'll wrap up there for today. So our 9th anniversary podcast for 30-Minute Reviews is coming up. What me and Peter are going to be talking about is our top 10 personal favorite games of all time. That's going to be our topic of conversation for that episode. So we will, we'll be talking about that. That'll also be up on this feed as well. But that'll be in the near future. But we'll wrap up there for today. And until our next episode, have a great rest of your week.